everyone, and a very warm welcome. My name is Roshni Rao, and I lead on the Arts and Culture work for South India at the British Council. And I'm delighted to welcome you all to this panel discussion on the topic, Bridging the Gap, Translation and the Politics of Languages in India. The conversation is focused around the India Literature and Publishing Sector Study, an important and very timely primary research study commissioned earlier by the British Council in late 2020 and conducted by the Artex company. British Council works on a range of arts and culture work in South India. To name a few, we have projects like Our Shared Cultural Heritage, Madras Medai, and Connections Through Culture. We also partner with a variety of literary and cultural festivals and support the publishing sector through a range of India-UK initiatives, opportunities, and collaborations. This research study was one such initiative aimed at understanding the challenges faced by Indian publishers, agents, authors, translators, and industry bodies when making literature written in Indian languages more widely available to an international English-speaking audience. It charts the current publishing and translation ecosystem across 10 Indian states and cities and includes insights from 100 stakeholders, many of whom are here with us today. Before we move into the discussion, a little bit of context about the research study. The British Council commissioned the study for these very reasons. Firstly, there was very little translation from India being published in the UK, and the UK sector was largely reliant on existing connections. Secondly, as we near the UK-India Together season, marking the 75th anniversary of India's independence, our aim was to strengthen bilateral relationships, consider India and UK's complex shared history, with a focus on shaping the future and developing meaningful long-term creative collaborations and connections. And a very strong literature component is a big part of that. And last but not least, the study focused on providing greater focus on sector and country-specific insights to inform not just our work, but all stakeholders in the sector. Given the diversity of our participants, we are very proud that the resulting report presents these insights in 8 focus languages. The main reasons for looking at these languages, states, and cities were places where interesting work is happening, key languages aligned with British Council work and focus, languages with strong literary traditions, thus Urdu and Punjabi, to acknowledge that much translation from the north, so it was vital to explore South Indian languages as well as regions like Orissa and Assam to learn about what is going on in this space as well. The report outlines intriguing findings. I will highlight just a few, and I encourage you all to take time to read the report. My colleagues will share a link to the report with everyone in the chat box, so please do have a look. With regards to the publishing ecosystem, the publishing sector is non-homogeneous and informal. Do the Indian language publishers operate distinctively from multinational publishers? There is very little direct investment from central government. Royalties and advances for authors are modest, contracts are not very common, and thus there are few rights sales opportunities. The domestic market is large, so there is little motivation for publishers to sell rights internationally, and there is a wide gap in the skilling to do so. With regards to the translation ecosystem, with 19,569 languages, there are complex translation flows in India, like the use of linked languages, multi-language translation, language for nationalism, and linguistic states. There are several key organizations working in the translation space, alongside universities, Indian Translators Association, and independent translators. There is a long tradition of translating literature to and from Indian languages in English, but resources for translators' translations are scant and often offer no possibility for royalties. There is a slight growth in translated titles appearing in publishing front lists, and major festivals are starting to include events on translation. There is shrinking space for literary criticism, which affects visibility of translated works. On insights regarding language specifically, Bengali and Tamil have been translated more than other languages. Mini Krishnan's modern India novels in translation and Gita Dharmarajan's Katha Prize short stories were watershed moments. State governments play a significant role in literary heritage and publishing in Indian language, as well as influencing libraries and curriculums. Audiobooks increasingly popular amongst younger generations who are less fluent reading their mother tongue. On recommendations, the main focus was interventions which raise awareness of Indian language, publishing and translation, which include a database showcasing Indian writers, translators, and sample translations, visits of international publishers to India and forums for international exchange, mobility grants for book fair attendance, and training and skills development for agenting and selling rights, and finally, structured training programs for translators. Also, advocacy body to support fair pay and translators' rights, and increase state support and promotion via subvention funding, either central or state level, or by agencies involved in cultural diplomacy. I very much look forward to delving deeper into these insights with our esteemed panelists in the following segment of today's program. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our moderator for the panel, Nita Gupta. Nita Gupta has been working towards creating publishing connectivities across different languages and cultures over 2 decades. She is the co-founder of the Publishers Exchange, a group of Indian language publishers formed during the pandemic to facilitate a sharing of ideas and resources. She is also the chief editor of Anuvad, the Bharatiya Anuvad Parishad's quarterly journal on translation. She was formerly the publisher at Yatra Books and is now the publishing director at Tete's Books. Nita Gupta has edited a volume of essays on translating from and into Indian languages titled Translating Bharat, Reading India. On that note, over to you, Nita.
Good evening, everyone. It's just wonderful to be here with you. And I think, some of the key takeaways for us, something that we're going to look at through this session this evening, is to look at the recommendations and the 2 primary challenges that this report focuses on. One is the lack of awareness about, international awareness on what the Indian literary market offers. And the second is, the inability, let's say, of the Indian publishers or Indian language publishers to access these spaces and to access these opportunities for international translation. So this session, where we have a stellar panel of publishers, activists, translators, feminists, social change makers, people who are really at the deciding, at the decision-making level for taking Indian literature to international markets. We have Gita Ramaswamy here, who's a social activist, writer, and a translator. She's the managing trustee for the Hyderabad Book Trust. She's worked extensively with, issues like bonded labor, agricultural wage labor, on land entitlement issues. And she's authored several books like India's Thinking, which is a manual on scavengers in Andhra Pradesh, Jeena Hai To Marna Seekho, Life and Times of George Reddy, and her recently published memoirs titled Lands, Guns, Caste, Woman, which is a memoir of a lapsed revolutionary. So along with Gita, we have Devika, who is a historian, social researcher, teacher, translator. She works at the Center for Developmental Studies in Kerala, and her work explores the interconnections between gender, development, politics, culture. In fact, she even has this, she's created this first generation women Malayali feminists, a website for them called Swatantre Vadini. So, we'll hear from Devika on issues that she deals with or the dilemmas that she deals with as a translator. We have Vasudendra, who's a Kannada author and publisher, very well known for his short stories, as his collection of personal essays and novels. He's one of the first openly gay literateurs from Kannada, and also the founder of Chanda Pustaka, the publishing house, which promotes young first-time writers. Vasu is also recipient of several state honors for his writing. So, we will have his point of view on the state of what is happening in Kannada and how we can possibly promote books and writing from there. And finally, we have Kannan Suddaram with us, who's the managing director and publisher at Kalachuvadu Publications. He is also the editor for the publication's literary and political journal of the same name. Kalachuvadu Publications was awarded the Best Publisher Award by Publishing Next in 2018. And they also received the Romerola Award for Best Translation of a French novel into an Indian language also in the year 2018. And in fact, they celebrated 25 years of publishing last year, which was a wonderful. We did some interesting sessions, which I was also a part of, and it was really fantastic to see the kind of celebration of publishing in a language which has managed to take so many wonderful authors international as well. So I'm going to open this session with a question each to our panelists. And we'll keep, about 10 minutes at the end of the session for audience questions and interactions. So please feel free to keep posting your questions on the chat box while the session is going on, because I'm sure a lot of questions will come up. And I hope to take them up at the end. So hopefully we'll have time to get you to also sort of, speak to us and speak to our panelists. So before, without too much ado, let me just move to Vasu. I'd like to open this question with you, Vasu. You're a Kannada author and a publisher. And I wanted to particularly talk about, in this, today, in the context of somebody like Gitanjali Shree's Tomb of Sand, becoming the first Indian language book in translation to make it to the International Booker shortlist. I mean, so far we were celebrating long listing, but today it's also made it to the shortlist. Do you think something like this will help translations from Indian languages, more translations from Indian languages get onto international reading lists? So do you think this is something positive? And I wanted to address this question, particularly in the context of Dravidian languages and what this means for a Kannada author in particular. Will this kind of long listing open up a window to other Indian languages internationally? Over to you, Vasu.
Thank you, Nita. That's a wonderful beginning, actually, to say we're talking about Gitanjali's book, which has been shortlisted. It's a proud moment, frankly, and definitely it will help us to promote the translation of the Indian languages. We have seen this happening when the Vegetarian of the Korean novel was translated and got the Booker Prize. And the most of the Korean novels got translated to English. It had that impact. And leave that one the locally, so Kannada books were not so much translated, but when Vivek Shanbag's Gachar Gochar was celebrated, and everyone started showing interest to the Kannada book. So definitely, this is a very good news that her novel has been shortlisted in the Man Booker Prize Award. We're very happy about it. Yeah. So for me, the translation is like this. Like we have a culture here in our native place where whenever someone goes to Varanasi, they take a tumbler full of Tungabhadra water. Tungabhadra flows near to my place where there is a famous Hampi Shiva temple is there, right? So they take the Tungabhadra water in a tumbler and they go to Varanasi and they pour that water in the river Ganga. And while coming, they bring Ganga water in that same tumbler and pour it back to our river Tungabhadra. Okay, so their idea is Shiva in Varanasi should taste the water of our river, and our Shiva who is staying here in Tungabhadra should taste the Ganga water, how it tastes. So translation is like this. So now we are talking about Nile River when we are talking about English, like we can't bring the entire river to Karnataka. So what I can do is bring a tumbler full of water from Nile and give my Netravati or my Kaveri water to them back. So that's what is the translation for me. The challenges we face is if it is an English translation, so we're bringing the English to Kannada, we're very keen, everyone is very keen to publish the translation books. The main challenge comes is the royalty associated with it, that buying of the rights. So British and Americans who publish most of the English books, the charges they ask for the books is very high. If it is so high, invest that and take back that kind of a returns is very difficult with the regional or the vernacular languages. So people find it very difficult to go in the legal way of buying the rights. Many times they don't know whom to approach also, because the kind of money we make, and if we give the, say, something like $200 or something like that, that doesn't look big amount for the UK publishers or any of those things. So that's the issue we have. The other thing which we have is the local regional, the vernacular language. So luckily Karnataka is connected with 4 states, 4 to 5 states, where Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu, Marathi and Konkani. It's much easier for us to bring those books to Kannada. But if you tell me about, say, something Assami novel to directly connect to translate it to Kannada, no, it's impossible. Actually, we will not have so many hands which they know the language. But moving from Kannada to the English, it's the greatest challenge for us. So my observation of that is there are 2 reasons why most of the language books have gone to English. One is the areas or the states where maximum population has gone to Britain or to the America. So they have a very good connection and they translate it. And second one is the states where there is Christian population is high. For example, Kerala. So where the convents will be naturally will be very high, and the focus on the English will be high with the Christian schools and missionaries. So those states have published, means translated the books and published more. Unfortunately, Karnataka doesn't have that. It's a very, very insignificant percentage of Christians are there in Karnataka. So the convent or the English culture is less. So maybe it's a kind of a, we have to start somewhere with kind of a help. So I don't believe that we need a direct translator from Kannada to English, even someone who knows half English, and let him sit with another UK author, so who has a better hold on English and may not have very familiarity with Kannada. So a group activity can be formed and more translation can work. And we are very keen to publish many of our books into English. You know, like if you look at all the Indian languages, Kannada is the one which has got the highest awards in the Gnanapita. Means other than Hindi, Kannada has got 8 Gnanapita awards, which none of them, neither Malayalam nor Tamil nor Telugu, none of them have so many Gnanapita awards actually. So naturally, the kind of literature which is there, Kannada is very superior. But unfortunately, we don't have a good translators. Now they are coming up these days, and publishers also. The publishers were not showing so much interest till recent times, 4-5 years. Only from past 4-5 years, they are showing more interest on these vernacular languages. So that might help.
Thank you. That was quite insightful. And that, the fact that, about the English translation thing, I think that's something to think about. I think collaborative translations are the way forward if you want really high quality translations.
Yeah.
So thank you, Vasu. I'm going to move on to Gita here. So Gita Ramaswamy, first of all, a huge round of applause on the recent publication of your memoir. I know how hard you worked at it, and we're all quite delighted and excited, because I think it sort of, it makes gives us an archives all the wonderful work that you've been doing with marginalized communities. And in fact, before we start, I would like you to share a little bit about this work of yours, which has been, giving voice to the voiceless. Because a lot of your writing and a lot of the translations that you've done has been an act of giving voice to the voiceless. And also, like we were speaking earlier, and you mentioned that, you believe that Indian language publishers are at a disadvantage when it comes to English language, when it comes, when you compare them to English language publishers, especially in that zone of translation, access to grants and subsidies, and, all the challenges that we face, and what are the possible remedies you could suggest, or the kind of support that we could give each other and, find within the communities of translators and publishing. So over to you, Geeta. A little bit about your work, and then you're on mute, I think.
Yeah. We started the Hyderabad Book Trust 42 years ago, it was not meant to be a publishing venture so much as it was to bring in knowledge production into the Telugu world, because we felt at that time we had several radical movements, but there was no dissemination of information, there was no knowledge brought from outside. So there was a lot of quarrels among the movement people over what should have been simple issues. So we started with that. We started with a very clear idea that we're not going to be a commercial venture, it will be a low-cost publishing venture. But very soon we shifted to a mass market approach because that was what the demand was. But we are very careful, we were very careful in selecting our titles, in the sense that we don't go out of the movement sphere. I mean, we target, we work on Dalit issues, LGBT, marginalized communities, and also history, geography, in the sense those which give new insights into the issues concerned. So this has always been a venture which is, should help the marginalized sections of Telugu society. But over the years, I find, I think it's also true about other Indian languages, the Telugu market is shrinking. Both the Telugu states have English medium, the government schools also have English medium, private schools have shifted long ago to English medium. So we have a generation of students who can speak Telugu, see Telugu films, but do not read Telugu. So the WhatsApp conversations and some story collections are written in Roman script. And once a script dies, I don't know how far language remains. So in the shrinking Telugu market, because I also have access to the English language world because of my own publications or the translations that I do, I see that English language publishers get a lot of help in the form of grants, subsidies for books, travel, etc. Whereas unless you're well connected here, you don't get any offers for Indian languages. It's as if we are not just second-class citizens, we are some kind of third-class citizens. The literary world in India doesn't want the Indian languages to flourish or grow. So on the one hand, we face state government is like totally apathetic towards supporting publications, buying books, and it's a network of, it's a total network of corruption. We haven't supplied public libraries for something like 30 years because they ask, the first question they ask is, how much are you giving under the table? Now, in that context, if we want to keep languages alive, we need to have institutions that support ventures in regional languages, particularly those which deal with authors and translators from the marginalized sections. I think this is very important if we don't want languages to get extinguished. It is possible that Telugu is peculiar because I do see that Malayalam, Tamil, and Bengali flourish, or maybe they have pride in their language and we don't. I have really no idea. But it is a telling fact. I am not Telugu myself. I am Tamil, originally Tamil speaking, and it required someone like me to put in 42 years of work in Telugu publishing. That speaks for what is going on here. Yeah. So really, I think that institutions, national institutions, international institutions should look to support, should cut down their funding to English language publishers and shift to language publishers.
Thank you. Very strong views, but I think there's some big points for all of us to take away from there and consider and possibly come up with solutions. Moving to Devika, we have Devika here. Devika has done some incredible work, very strong feminist, translations. Like I mentioned earlier, she has this the website for the women, for the Malayali feminist archives of their writing. She's translated some incredible voices like Lalita Ambika Antarjanam, K. Saraswati Amma, K.R. Meera, Sarah Joseph, and even in fact some of the male authors you've translated are men who have broken stereotypes or sort of address patriarchy, authors such as Ambika Sudan Mangat. So would you like to tell us something about your dilemmas, or how the dilemmas as a translator, Devika? And also we were talking about this through an email conversation, and you mentioned that when you're looking at a market for translated literature, and when that market increases, or the demand and supply, and when that increases, it sort of shapes or changes a translator's priorities. So would you like to talk about that a little bit for our audiences?
Thank you, Gita. Yeah, thank you, Nita. Certainly, yeah, I think this is something it's been coming back to my mind again and again for quite some time now. Actually, when I started off as a translator, there was not much of a market. We were still wanting a market. We were hoping that more, there would be a broader market, and but it always comes with a price. So I'm not saying that having a large market for translations is a bad thing. I'm not saying that, but it comes with a price, and I think we need to reflect on what that could be. And in my case, there are moments that I think that I should maybe, this is the turning point in my own career as a translator. Maybe I have to think of ways of continuing translation, but definitely stepping out of the compulsions of the market. So I could summarize my anxieties in 3 points. Now, first, I think, there is an increasing preference for younger authors who are current, who are active on social media, maybe, who are also attractive in some ways, articulate. Some of the best authors we have are not articulate. They're not attractive. They might actually resist the market into. Now, how to get them into translations? How to bring the attention of translators and publishers, generally convince the market that we need to look beyond the youthful is, I think, an important dilemma. So when I know several authors in Malayalam who are not, those who are not alive, some people who died young, who may not qualify to be called, whose work may not qualify to be called classic. They don't get translated. It's very, very difficult. For a good example from Malayalam is the very well-known filmmaker who was, in fact, one of the best literary voices from Malayalam, P. Padmarajan. P. Padmarajan was a very well-known literary author before he became a filmmaker. And his short stories are path-breaking in Malayalam, but it has been almost impossible to find a publisher because he's no more. Some prices require that the author should be alive. So all these priorities, have become very dominant now. That's one thing. The second source of anxiety that I have is about literary style. There seems to be a huge preference for realism. And in fact, to the point that sometimes the editors in major publishing houses, translation editors, who are young people, seem to have this heavy preference for realism. So, when you try to introduce an author who has made significant breaks in form, who have gone beyond realism, it is such a challenge. For example, an author who changes tenses, there are, I personally have translated one author who is no realist at all. He's a brilliant author, but he's no realist. So in his stories, the tenses keep changing. So what you think is happening in the present might suddenly shift and move into either the past or the future. So objects appear and disappear, their genders change. So this is actually part of the author's effort to overcome certain conventions in language, etc. It's amazing because it's not, if you look at writing in, say Britain or the UK, say someone like Jeanette Winterson or others, they move across realist and non-realist registers with absolute ease and nobody's bothered. But somehow when it comes to translations and in the exchanges between translators and editors, in my case, I have had to clarify endlessly, So somehow there seems to be a preference for realism emerging, and I suspect that it has to do with marketing also. And thirdly, I think, so those are the 2 points. And the third point is about, this is and I think this is a major point. Now in Malayalam, for example, Malayalam literature, the new writing in Malayalam, the Malayalam novels particularly, have been moving away from the standardized Malayalam. We all know that languages are not, they have different layers, different regional styles of using the language, of speaking the language. So you have, right now we are in a moment when we are deconstructing this whole idea of Malayali in literature. So the big political movement in Malayalam literature right now is about, rediscovering local idiom, local dialects, local ways of, there is one novel at least where an intra-state conflict is actually depicted in terms of a contest between two different styles of speaking Malayalam. So, but what I'm finding it alarming and surprising is that all this is being rendered into a flat standard English. So many of the prize-winning books from Malayalam that you're reading now, written recently, read very differently in the Malayalam, because there is a very important aspect of those words. It's right. The idiom, it's a regional, local idiom, and this is a political act. It's not just some neutral, some just coincidence or something like that. It's done deliberately by the authors. But again, you translate it into a very standardized, realist Malayalam, English, sorry. To me, that is just, I just cannot comprehend it. I just cannot do it. Because as I told you, when I started translation, I didn't start it as a career. I didn't start it as, maybe pastime, nothing. For me, this is politics. This is doing politics. And I cannot really, this is not a question of being faithful in some sense. It's a question of whether you can really carry over the politics of what is happening in Kerala into the translations. And when I can't do that, then I think the better option is to step back from commercial publishing, start a website, do your own work. So Swadhandriya Vadani, for example, is all about doing that.
Yes, these are some really important points raised by you, and I think these are something maybe we could also come back to after I just get some this whole idea of the market and the language and and just sort of standardizing. I think these are very, very important points, which if we have time we will come back to in the next round. I'm going to move to Kannan right now. Kannan, one of the important the findings of this report was that acquisition and sale of translation rights is a major barrier that Indian language publishers face. And I'm putting this question to you because you are an extremely successful publisher in the sense that you have carried so many Indian voices to international readers via translation. So how did you combat these issues, and what were you doing differently that you saw the kind of results? And related to this, I'm just giving a small little second part of the question where this is something we talk about quite often, where between fiction and non-fiction, you said there's a huge difference, where while fiction is still easier to sell, non-fiction writing from South Asia hardly travels via translation to the West. So looking forward to hearing your views on these. I mean, one, of course, give us all the mantras you use, how to sell a book, how to find the right translator, all those mantras we want. And secondly, about this, this whole fiction, non-fiction translation issue. So over to you, Kannan.
Thank you, Nita. So without being falsely modest, I have to say that I have not been hugely successful at all. And I'll tell you why. See, I have been at this for nearly 15 years now. I first went to Frankfurt under the Frankfurt Book Fair Fellowship Program in 2007. And I've been going till the COVID every year. And I've also traveled to other parts of the world. Wherever I went, I always tried to sell rights for Tamil works. So let's say on the whole, I might have taken about 750 meetings for all these years with publishers of 50, 60 languages across the world. And if you calculate the number of writers that I've actually managed to translate to any one language abroad, that is totally 5. And the number of books, rights actually I might have sold might be not more than a couple of rights per year. So yes, I mean, it is important that we have sort of cracked the glass ceiling. But to say that this is a huge success may not be very accurate, because the amount of time, resources spent on this has been very huge. That's a huge amount of time is spent, and the results have not been matching. But we have. I'm happy that we have got some results, and I don't have any fall on any mantra, or I don't do things differently at all. But what I can say is that I persevered. Year after year, I went wherever I could, and I kept at this. Initially, of course, there was not much success, and I had to sort of start from the scratch in the international market, because there was nothing before me that I could point to. There was no author that was known internationally at that point. I didn't have an Ardit Roy, I can say, or any Nobel Prize winner or a Booker Prize winner, or any translated books that were widely popular. And there was nothing of that sort. And actually, to be frank, that almost nobody I met knew that there was a language called Tamil, even alone that was a very literate language or a classical language. There was no awareness of the language. And all I could find was that maybe a translation of Sangam poetry in English at that point, and Tirukural in some languages, but not known in Frankfurt as it is. So it was a very difficult journey, but it was also very exciting. And I think I put passion and commitment first and business second. Otherwise, it may not have happened. It probably didn't make any business sense in the initial years. And even now today, if you calculate this with the amount of effort that has been put forward, it won't make business sense. But it makes a lot of sense in the sense that it is very important for us to take Tamil authors to the international market, to see that that some of them sell well, and there are requests for more books. That's a very happy thing. Also, that we have managed to reach some remote, very unknown markets from the point of view of India, or from the point of view of Tamil Nadu. For example, when we sold the book rights to Azerbaijan for a very small money, small publisher, we couldn't get a copy because the Indian Postal Service had no contact with the Azerbaijan government to transfer post. So we had to get through a neutral country. So to reach out that far and to get one of your authors published there, that is a very exciting, and that is very rewarding in that sense. So that's what I have to say about translating Tamil authors to the world. Coming to the second part of the question regarding sort of disparity in translations, I want to avoid making any sweeping statements or making any generic comments, but I just want to say a few things that I've observed, which these need to be researched and either proven right or wrong. But this is what I have broadly observed. Is that one, before we go to the international market, let us see what happens within India between the Indian languages and English. So lot of non-fiction books, ideas, philosophy, history, research, politics, sociology, they all get translated from English to Indian languages. But if you look the other way around, what goes from the Indian language to English, I don't think much of non-fiction has space there. I don't think any books of history or art criticism or literature criticism or research books make it to English, or even if they do, not much. Mostly what goes is literature. and memoirs. And if you see what travels from the Indian languages to the international market, again, it's literature, memoirs, Ayurveda, yoga, spirituality. So that is what goes from here. Not any literary criticism or any work of non-fiction. So it's very difficult for that to travel. So I think that is something that we have to study carefully and see, understand why it is happening, why that experience travels one way and ideas travel other way. And then we have to correct some course of that.
Thank you, Khanna. I think there's always so much to learn from this, and in fact, something that I wanted to mention here was that the New India Foundation is now supporting quite a bit of non-fiction translations from Indian languages into English. So maybe that will impact and create a sort of impact a few years down the line. So we're almost at 6:40, and before we open it up to audience questions, I just wanted to get quick comments from all of you. There are a couple of things like, I would like to just ask you that have things changed, with all these disruptions and developments and studies and international awards and, all these kind of recognition and all these kind of things happening at one level. Has this in any way tangibly changed what, how translators are being treated, or, are they, their recognition in terms of the proper pay scales, or is there some kind of changes coming, do you think, in the last few, say, 5 to 7 years? Maybe we could start with Devika. You could tell us as a translator, and I'd like all of us to address this question because this is a very important part of when you're looking at taking text from one language and taking it internationally. Are the translators being respected? Is there some kind of a change, like a tangible change that has come in this whole scenario? Starting with Devika, would you like to address this? Even translations between Indian languages, have there been any major changes? What is it that we are struggling with? What would we like to, and how would we like to bring change to this aspect of the work we do?
Yes, I think there have been changes, but perhaps not enough, and perhaps not all, very good ones. I think there's some change because we have a discourse about translation now, which at least which kind of takes translation beyond mechanical reproduction of ideas from one language to another. We now, at least there's some understanding in the general public, reading public, that translation is not a mechanical transfer of ideas from one language to another. But at the same time, I don't think, because I personally believe a translator's work is it's almost like an adaptation, like say a film adaptation, that much. But that's definitely not, that kind of recognition is not there. In between, there was a move, and I think the translator's name used to appear on the cover more frequently, but with some newer publications, that practice seems to have disappeared. We seem to be needing to fight for that again. I have tried to be a very assertive translator. So, because a translator, I think, approaches a text through a reading, and it's very important that reading then, therefore, is very, very important when the work appears in a new language. Now, that an acceptance of that, I think, is still quite lacking. So in OUP, translations used to carry a long introduction. It's not as if everyone would read that introduction, but anyone interested in, say, comparative literature would find that introduction useful. But in the later phase of my own work, I know that there are editors who told me that the translation should just read like the author was writing in English. It's of course an impossible task, and I had to kind of, not give in to that. I haven't given in to that. But that's been the mood. So you have more and more, there was this demand, this pressure. And I think with the market becoming what it is, I think that pressure is bound to increase. And I think translations, personally, I think translators should resist that.
Thank you. Thank you, Devika. Would somebody else like to, address this question? Vasu, Kannan, Geeta, would you like to say something on, what?
Very few ones. So 1 minute, I'll talk on that. Like definitely, the awards and recognitions help that particular language to publish more books in English. As I said, I gave you already an example of Gachar Kochar and also our Jayant Kaikani's book got an award, DCL award. So these two achievements helped us. I can show that with a reference to my own book getting translated. My first book translation was just like a miracle. Someone came and worked on it and did it. But when I approached for the second book, actually, so the time has been changed 3 years down the line. So more than 5 publishers came forward to publish the book. So that shows there is an interest now, the inclined interest towards the Kannada books. Okay, so that is definitely going to help. More than that, one point we should not forget: when a book gets translated to English and it becomes success, all the Indian languages come forward to translate that book. It will not happen directly, like like if my book has to go from Kannada to Telugu, it will not happen so easily. But if it becomes an English, so if I cross the English book, then I'll bridge. If I cross the English bridge, then I'll be able to reach all the Indian languages much easily than without an English bridge. So that is
That's a
a
very
real
good,
issue.
yeah, very good point. Geeta, Kannan, would you like to come in on this and say something?
Yeah, I agree with Vasu that it's a pity that, if you don't cross the English barrier, you don't get to other languages. I think the formation of linguistic states has also had to do something with this. Earlier, there were the barriers between states were fluid. People on the border spoke 2 languages, 3 languages. But now, with schools only taking up the language of that particular state, this kind of bilingualism, trilingualism has died down. The other thing about awards and lists, I think a lot of it is politics. Yeah, it's not always at the best. It's like someone hitting the jackpot and a whole lot of other people just getting ignored. And one of the best, I think, novelists in India, Vibhuti Bhushan Bandyopadhyay, has never got a single novel, has not got a single award to his credit, right? So I'm not one for, awards or helping. You actually need solid translation grants like the Tamil Nadu government is taking up with Mini Krishnan, like Zuban is taking up now with the new initiative to translate. You have solid grants like that, which also take in the necessity for editing, because editing is also very important in translating. I think these help much more than awards. Awards just picks up one translator, one writer from a lot and puts her or him on top.
Right. Kannan, were you saying something?
Yeah, so by selling books in Indian languages in most cases, and paying royalty to translators, I don't think translators are likely to make enough money that's equivalent to the kind of work they put in. So but translators have to be paid fairly, and that's the only way to go forward, bringing in more translations. So, like what the Tamil Nadu government has done, I think there's need for more state governments, even the central government, or foundations to be able to find ways to support translations, so that translators are paid adequately for that work they do.
Right, and in fact, I think even universities, like the translation departments at universities like Ashoka and JNU, Jadavpur, I think they also can create this awareness by dialogues and by, create awareness for, say, marginalized writers or marginalized voices, and give them an opportunity, give a sort of a public space to these names, so that, there's something, it generates an interest, and then maybe translations can follow. I noticed that, Devika, you had your hand raised. Were you saying something at that point? You're on mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in at that point when through maybe offer a slightly different view from Vasudendra, because see, there was at one point of time a very free traffic of translations between Kannada into Malayalam from Kannada, Tamil, and and the only criterion needed was that the book was a success in those languages. So a hit Bengali novel, a Bengali novel that is widely acclaimed in Bengal would be inevitably translated into Malayalam almost contemporaneously. And Kannada, yes, there was a steady Sri Krishna Alahanli and others. I mean, we grew up reading Kannada and Bengali, and I believe K.R. Mira's Hangwoman is a real tribute to that, because we all thought that Sharachandra, for example, was Malayali when we grew up. We did not know that he was Bangla. And Tamil also, in fact, from Tamil also very stream of popular writing, like science fiction, Tamil science fiction, for example, which was definitely not highbrow. That flowed into Malayalam. So there was at one point of time this kind of traffic. However, all Bengali novels that are successful in English are not being translated into Malayalam. Same thing applies to Kannada. I mean, not the successful ones. That's not happening anymore. And it's a worrying phenomenon. We really need to think about that. I just wanted to flag that. Thanks.
Thank you, Devika. So, it's 6:50, and I think we need to quickly move into the audience questions. I think I'll just pick some of the questions from the chat box, because I don't think we have the time to, I'm just going to check with the organizers. Can I just pick up the questions from here? There is a question from Aarti Jaiprakash, who says to Kannan sir, how hesitant or open are authors in getting their works translated or giving due credit to translators? Do they find it like dampening when it comes to the scope of a translated work? I didn't get the dampening, but I think, do they feel that a limitation in the translations?
So, okay, in my experience, authors are always very excited to get the book translated, and they're always very supportive and have interesting in giving me rights to translate, to promote translations. And I've not seen any hesitation on their part to give due credit to translators as such. So I think authors are very happy and excited to get their works done, and happy to share the limelight with translators. So that is my feeling from Tamil.
One, Nita, for the previous question, there is one thing which I would like to mention. Generally, authors will be very happy to get translated to the other language, and also they will like to give credits to the translator. But I have seen English publishers had a culture where they don't want to give sufficient credit to the translators. Many times I had to put my foot forward and say, please publish his name on the front page, don't miss it. So I think there is a trend in the English publication to ignore the translator, the publishers especially. We don't do like that in Kannada, but there it is very high, and many of the times we will not know who's the translators of Satyajit Ray stories or Rabindranath Tagore stories or Tolstoy stories for that matter. So that trend is high in the English, but not in the Indian languages. We give very sufficient importance for the translations in the Indian languages.
That's wonderful. We have some wonderful people in the audience here. I think there's Tejaswini Niranjana, who's talking about the Ahmedabad University now starting a one-year diploma in literary translation from August 2022. And I think she's mentioned here that it will be wonderful to draw on your group to help us convey the excitement about translations from Indian languages. So thank you, Tejaswini. It's lovely to have you here. There's another question coming up from how far is the opportunity for Indian Tamil literary work that represents culture and heritage, precisely Indianism? How difficult is it for works like that to get translated into English or other foreign languages? And what could be the reception for such kind of literatures? The way Russian literature is accepted or read widely by Indians or by other people around the world. I think there's a question from Karthik Srinivas. Is this This is for the whole, it says a question for Kannan sir, but it's a question which anybody can can attempt to answer, Gita or Devika, Kannan, Vasu, who would like to address this?
You want me to speak?
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, when it comes to translating into Indian English, the fact that the work is imbibed in local culture may not be a very big problem. That is my feeling. So we have quite successfully managed to sell some rights of that kind of works. But when it goes to international market, yes, that can be a problem. You might get an answer saying this is too much into the local culture and our readers would not understand. But yes, we have read Russian literature that are very, very imbibed with the culture. That's a very good example comparison. But the way to break this is to try and get more and more work translated. So only by reading many works of Indian Russian literature did we understand the context of those works by making out on our own. So the only way forward is to get translated somehow. And as we get translation more and more works, the readers can develop a context of, let's say, Tamil or Kannada or the Hindi word and understand more and more easily. And we have sort of made a breakthrough there with the translations of Perumal Murugan. And they are very, 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 very local to the region where he is there, but they are successful. And we first sold two rights to the US market. And there is a request now. I think the third novel has already been published. And the publisher continues to publish one work after another. So I think that we have seen some kind of breakthrough.
Right. So also, when we talk about translations, I think most other countries, most literatures are supported by their governments for translations to be put out into international languages. We ourselves, a lot of us publish literatures from Turkey and Spain or France or in other European countries as well. We publish a lot of literature which is supported by their institutes in those countries. And I think that is something that we have found lacking in India in terms of, which grants which could help foreign publishers, just take on take on the task of translating Indian literatures to their languages. And then as you grow along a big list of Indian language literatures into multiple foreign languages, you can expect to see some kind of a, familiarity or whatever you want, but it has to start somewhere. I mean, the way it works for other, So here I'm going to request Alekha or one of the organizers to just unmute Mandira so that she could ask a question. Mandira Sen is a very senior publisher in our midst. Mandira? Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Lovely
you
to
can
see
hear
you.
me?
Yeah.
Well, I was asking how this great Kannada novel, Khachar Ghochar, got to Faber. And without much fanfare, suddenly you see Faber has published it. So I think that's very interesting. And I don't know if it had multiple translations into European languages, because it really is a brilliant novel. And it's lovely to see that happened, but I don't know how it happened. So if someone could speak about that. About funding for translations of Indian literature, well, Infosys's Murthy has given a huge chunk to Harvard University Press, right? But I think those are probably classics. I don't know if he's doing modern.
Yeah, it's more the Sanskrit or the classic list, yeah.
But he didn't think of giving it to anyone in India or dividing it up or anything like that. That's interesting.
Yeah, but I think, increasingly, there's a kind of a growing awareness, and I think a lot of people are looking at private funding of, creating like corpus funding for translations from Indian languages. And I think we need to all come together to give that push somewhere, So I think with that, I should really hand over back to the wonderful organizers for them to say their closing words. And thank you, all of you wonderful panelists. Let's connect and stay connected anyway. And thank you to the wonderful audiences here for being, so interactive and sharing your, over to Alekha.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the Artex company, Nita, I'd like to thank you for moderating this session. Also to our panelists, Devika, Gita, Khanna, and Vasu, for everything that you've shared over the last hour. I think the insights that we heard have added so much to this conversation that the report sort of got the ball rolling on. And I hope that although this is the last conversation in the series, we can keep it going. Thank you to everyone in our audience for taking the time to join us. Please do give us your feedback. You'll see a Zoom poll pop up on your screen shortly. You'll also be able to find the poll at the bottom of your screen if you're on a laptop, or in the Zoom settings if you're on a mobile device. A very, very, very big thank you to our partners, the Publishers Exchange, the Virtual Book Fair, and the British Council for supporting this discussion. I'd like to thank the British Council's entire team in India and the UK that worked towards the report and this series of discussions. Thank you also to the research team from the Artex company for all their hard work in putting together the report and for putting this session together and running it so smoothly. Before we close, I just wanted to say a few words on an upcoming program that the British Council is working on with us at the Artex company. It's the International Publishing Fellowship India 2022. This is a peer-to-peer mentoring and professional development program where publishers from the UK will be matched with publishers of similar career stage and publishing interests in India. The open call for applications has now closed, and I'm sure many of you here with us have already applied. But I do want to announce that it's a year-long program consisting of masterclasses, networking opportunities, and professional updating that will be open to all, and it'll begin this May.